achieved.
I didn't get the Chuck Liddell Tito Ortiz pay-per-view, but I watched the highlights, the main event, and it was what I expected it to be. It was ugly. I as most people did, assume Tito would win, seeing he's 5 years younger and actually has been active. And Chuck, you know, when he was last fighting, didn't have a chin. But it's just like the fact that he looked as bad as he did, Chuck, and then is saying after the fact, I felt good out there. I'm not saying I'm done fighting. Who, you know, what do we get? Chuck Liddell versus Ken Shamrock? Is that something that could? It's probably something they're going to look and go, yeah, that's a possibility. It was ugly. It was really ugly, and it's unfortunate to see him continue down that road. I'm hoping he stops. You know, I know Dana White stopped him before, and some people might have frowned upon that, but hey, you can see why. You know, his chin's already gone, and now defensively, he's incapable of defending himself when he's out there. Offensively, he couldn't do anything. And a guy who's not known for his striking ability put him down with relative ease. So I'm hoping Chuck hangs it up. Thank you for a great career, but you're wrecking it now. You're really tarnishing a lot of the things you've accomplished and making the sport look bad as well, as far as I'm concerned. You know, I know that it's the love of the game. It's hard to give it up, but honestly, it needs to stop. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson. On this episode of the show, we're breaking down not one but two main card events. First and foremost, on November 30th, we get the Ultimate Fighter finale, Heavy Hitters finale, which will go down on November 30th, and I'll be giving you 4 main card predictions for that fight. All the fights that are the preliminary fights and the fights that are on the main card that aren't posted yet will be posted in my preliminary section on the website, kamikazeoverdrive.net. I will then give you my 4 main card fights for UFC Fight Night 142, which will be in Adelaide, Australia, taking place on December 1st. Again, same thing, prelims will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. Again, they're only posting what appears to be 4 main card fights, so after that, we'll post everything else in the prelims. Now, I am coming off a very, very good showing at UFC Fight Night. What was it? UFC Fight Night 141, in which I overall went 10-2. Including a couple of big upsets, 3 big upsets actually. Now my big bankroll, my big reward bundle didn't return a profit, only winning 25.84 units, so you lost about 10 units, unfortunately, because I lost one key fight. My big bankroll bundle, 73.21 units, cashing in large. And the reason it cashed in large, well, one of my gold plays was Louis Smoka and Jingliang Li. Li Jingliang, parlayed together, and then in my silver plays, I had a single bet on Ngannou and a single bet on Alistair Overeem, so those were huge. I also had a bet on Yen and Wu, who pulled off a nice upset. I felt like that was just a poorly lined fight and getting the submission. And if you go way down my list, I had Kevin Holland by submission and Smolka's fight to go under 1.5 rounds, so that was a solid return overall. The one fight that prevented me, Ken and Song losing a decision, that prevented me from cashing in huge in both fronts. So hey, we are still running, I think it's 6-7 events in a row where I've absolutely dominated the payouts. They've been just massive. And again, we're going to try and keep it rolling here. You can buy my bet packs for $15 in the bet shop. You can subscribe and save yourself between $15 and $20 for the rest of 2018, so that's pretty solid as well. So certainly consider there. Again, I'm posting stuff. I love Francis Ngannou. I thought it was a great fight. I thought he was going to take that, not with relative ease, but certainly it was a very winnable fight for him as an underdog, and a lot of people were overlooking him. And I'm a little disappointed in myself for not pulling the trigger on him as my number 1 gold play. I really felt he had a great opportunity to do so, because when you look at the guys I've been picking up with lately with my top gold plays, guys like I had Cynthia Calvillo, Jacare Souza, Anthony Smith, Court McGee, Sean Strickland, these guys all underdogs. Jordan Rinaldi, another one. Guys I've nailed lately. Johnny Walker, I had Johnny Walker as well. So I wish I could have pulled the trigger on that one with my number 1 play, but still we cashed in fairly well. Also, if you're looking for an opportunity to bet, this video once again is sponsored by melbet.org. You can check out their website on a link in the description below. They provide a number of betting options, including excellent betting options on mixed martial arts, and if you go there, you can bet on tons of events well in advance, and the odds are very good, much better than a lot of the odds we get around here. Not always, but they're very competitive. So again, melbet.org, there's a link in the description below, or on my website if that's where you're watching this. You can check it out. I'm actually going to be mentioning all the odds they have available for each fight throughout this show. You can follow me on Twitter at KO_predictions. And let's hope to keep it rolling. We got a lot of good fights to break down, so let's get to that first main card prediction. So fight number 1 on the tough finale event will take place in the women's strawweight division as Yeon Kim, also known as Fire Fist, fighting out of South Korea with a record of 7 wins, 1 loss, and 2 decisions, takes on the debuting Antonina La Pantera Shevchenko, fighting out of Kurdistan with an undefeated record of 6-0. Now Kim currently coming in as the underdog at plus 270, Shevchenko at minus 303 on the comeback. Now this fight was originally expected to feature Ashley Evans-Smith. She pulled out, and Kim stepped in on roughly 3 weeks' notice to take this opportunity. Now you're looking at Kim first. She lost her debut competing at bantamweight. She made the cut to flyweight and has won back-to-back bouts since, both by split decision, defeating Justine Kish and Melinda Fabian, as I said, both by splits on the scorecards. For Shevchenko, she's the older sister of top flyweight title challenger Valentina Shevchenko. So she comes into this matchup with a lot of expectations. She's undefeated. She fought once on the Tuesday Night Contender Series, winning a second-round TKO on that show. She is an inch taller. She's a southpaw. Kim is the younger fighter by 5 years. Now, looking at Shevchenko first, she carries a 39-1 kickboxing record that includes 6 wins by TKO. She made her mixed martial arts debut in 2002. She fought until 2005, and then took a 12-year hiatus, returning in 2017. She's now fought 3 times, so she's certainly back in the swing of things, very similar to her sister. As far as what she brings to the cage, see, she has an excellently devastating tie clinch. Throws brutal knees from that position, and she's very strong. Additionally, when she gets her opponent on the cage, she's good at using head pressure and framing with that forearm to really control them and then land strikes from that spot. She has good punches at range. She has volume, but she's got some pop with her volume as well, and she does a nice job of punching around the guard, and she doesn't overextend herself or exert herself when she's attacking. If she does hit the mat, she's got good ground and pound when she gets on top. It's probably going to come from a knockdown. When fighters threaten to take her down, she's got pretty good hips and a decent sprawl. She was taken down from the clinch on the show, but it was late in the round, and she didn't suffer much damage. Now you look at Yeon Kim. She has 3 wins by submission, which when you're talking about fighting a striking-based fighter, you always look at a fighter's grappling chops, what they bring to the table. She has 3 wins by submission, all in the regional scene, where she actually came into the UFC being known for her submissions and her groundwork, her ground and pound ability to finish girls on the mat. But since coming to the UFC, 3 fights, she's attempted a grand total of 1 takedown unsuccessfully over those 3 matchups. So she's really deviated from what she did well to get here. She could opt to make a change and remove the strength of her foe Shevchenko and take her down and beat her up. But of course, there's always those questions: was her success on the regional scene a product of where she was fighting, as far as what her wrestling skills were capable of? And now that she's in the UFC, she recognizes it's just not there. If we get out of her what we've been getting so far inside the octagon, it's going to be a striking-based fight. She strikes behind a lead left hook or jab. Her volume totals have been a little bit concerning against Justine Kish. She got outlanded 96-68, but won a decision. Against Fabian, she edged her out 73-72 in total strikes. So again, she's either losing or just very close as far as total volume is concerned. She likes to lower her head and kind of swing a little bit wildly. She does have pop in her hands, there's no denying that, but she also opens herself up to counters, and that can be a major concern. Kim, overall, she's just struggled when trying to outland her opponents, and she's fought lesser strikers when compared to Antonina here. And again, I don't expect her to see her deviate and take the fight to the ground. Again, it's a comfort zone she's moved into, and anytime you're looking at a fighter saying they have to deviate from what we've been seeing a lot of them recently, it's difficult. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's difficult to forecast that, and sometimes it's difficult for them to make that change, so we're not going to expect that out of her. Shevchenko, I think she's going to land the better strike. She's going to take advantage of Kim's overall lack of defense, and watch for that tie clinch. I think she's going to really bust her up in that position, even though Kim is very physically strong, and my prediction is Antonina Shevchenko to defeat Yeon Kim by decision. Jumping to the UFC's middleweight division, Darren the Dentist Stewart, 9-3-0 with 1 no contest, welcomes the debuting Edmen the Golden Boy Shahbazyan, undefeated at 6-0. Now Stewart currently the underdog at plus 133. Shahbazyan the comeback on him at minus 154, so a slight favorite, which is good for a debuting fighter. Very interesting to see that against a solidified UFC veteran. Stewart comes into this matchup. He started his UFC career winless with that no contest over against Francimar Barroso. He has since won back-to-back wins by TKO. For Shahbazyan, again, I'm butchering that name, he is undefeated. He's coming off a win in the Contender Series. He's 3-0 already in 2018, went 4-0 in 2017, in which the year he made his pro debut, so he's very, very fresh out of the box. Still got that new fighter smell to him, but he's looked good so far. He's 2 inches taller than Darren Stewart, and he is the younger fighter by 7 years. Now, when you look at Shahbazyan's record, all 7 of his wins have come by knockout, all in the first round, 5 of them coming within 90 seconds, 4 coming inside the first minute. That's impressive. But then you look a little bit further. He fought in Gladiator Challenge, which is an organization notorious for setting up squash matchups to promote these guys into the upper echelon of mixed martial arts, and a lot of times they don't do well. His last 3 pre-Tuesday Night Contenders opponents had a combined record of 19 wins and 47 losses, including one opponent who had 41 losses, 20 by knockout, 21 by submission. So his other 2 opponents had accounted for not a lot of, I think one of them had just one, was 0-1, and one was like 1-6, so he's facing some very low-level competition. What he does bring to the cage, and we saw in the Contenders bout, he attacks his opponent with flurries of punches. He likes to brawl, mix it up, and in that fight he hurt him and eventually finished him on the mat just with some strikes. Again, there's some major concern over his lack of long fight experience and quality of opposition, and the fact that he's never faced adversity. Those are all concerns, and again, we've seen very little of him. Even if you get your hands on actual footage of him, it's the fact that he's barely in the cage at all and the fights are over, which a lot of people gravitate towards, and you can see the line has been influenced by that. I don't necessarily like that. When you look at Darren Stewart, 7 of his 9 wins have come by knockout. He's 2-1 a decision, and both of his he has 2 losses by submission. He's never been knocked out. Stewart, in his last 2 fights, has looked much more measured. His cardio is a bit of a question mark. He will slow down in fights, but he's looking like he's trying to be less of a brawler and more of a, I don't know if to say a tactician, but at least a guy who's going to fight a little more responsibly. Grappling's a bit of concern here, and that can bring on those cardio issues if he's forced out of his comfort zone. But the thing we do know with Darren Stewart, he has a good chin. We've seen him eat some big shots before. He stays calm under pressure. He will endure and then stop opponents as they fade. He's done that multiple occasions, both in his last 2 fights, hurt guys in the later rounds. His last 3 knockout victories have come twice in the second round and once in round 3. So that tells you what he's capable of doing. And, of course, Edmen's never fought that long. He's never gone beyond the opening round. He's barely gone beyond the opening 90 seconds. It's hard to trust a guy in that situation. It's hard to trust a KO artist coming off the regional scene, having faced low-level opposition with no long fight experience. Ultimately, I think what's going to happen here is we're going to see Darren Stewart survive those early flurries. Shahbazyan's going to start to fade, and my prediction is Darren Stewart to defeat Edmen Shahbazyan by TKO. Our third breakdown takes place in the UFC's bantamweight divisions. The 9th-ranked Pedro the Young Punisher Munhoz, 16 wins, 3 losses, and 1 no contest, takes on 14th-ranked Bryan Kid Lightning Caraway with a current record of 21 wins and 9 defeats. Currently, Munhoz a heavy favorite. Well, not a heavy favorite, but minus 233. Caraway coming in as the underdog at plus 208. Now, Caraway, he's coming off a split decision loss to Cody Stamann. He had won back-to-back bouts over Aljamain Sterling, which was a big win, and previously that he beat former champion Eddie Wineland, former WEC champion Eddie Wineland. He had a 2-year layoff heading into the Stamann bout. For Munhoz, he had a 4-fight winning streak snapped by a split decision loss to John Dodson. He had decision wins over Brett Johns. He has just 2 losses in his last 9 fights, both by split decision, so he's putting up a pretty good run of it here. Physically, Caraway 2 inches taller. He'll have a 4-inch reach advantage. He's also the older fighter by 2 years. Now, what we have here is a pairing of 2 very good grapplers. Caraway overall 17 wins by submission, including 4 wins in the UFC. He hasn't picked up any submission victories since 2014, which seems like a long time. He's only fought 4 times in that span. The guy's very good on the mat. For Munhoz, overall 9 victories by submission, 3 inside the octagon, not including a no contest fight against Gerard Sanders, which was he won by nasty guillotine and got that overturned, and that's his move of preference, is that just brutally choking and crushing guillotine. He's never been submitted, and it's worth noting Bryan Caraway has been submitted twice earlier in his career. Now, when you look at the numbers overall and what they bring to the cage, Bryan Caraway appears to have the edge in wrestling, volume at least. He's landing more takedowns per fight than Munhoz, but almost by a 2-to-1 ratio. So that tells us if one of these 2 guys is going to take this fight down and control it, Caraway has the edge on that aspect, if it's possible. Caraway's taken down 8 of his 9 UFC opponents. He's a very smothering top game with good transitions, and that's how ultimately he beat Aljamain Sterling. He got out of some bad spots early and then took over that fight. But he needs to be incredibly careful on the mat against Pedro Munhoz, who is just a devastatingly accurate and dangerous submission fighter. You give him one opportunity, he's going to lock it on, and you're in trouble. And when you look at his record and his run, the only guy who had any success taking him down and having, not getting submitted and winning the fight with takedowns incorporated into attack was in Munhoz's short notice debut against Rafael Santos, who was one of the elite of the division. He landed multiple takedowns in that fight. And since that matchup, Munhoz, over 9 fights, has given up a grand total of 3 takedowns. So that shows you how dangerous he is on the mat and how unwilling people are to take him down. His grappling, the grappling chops in this fight could cancel each other out, and we see that happen more often than not, and I actually kind of expect to see that here and force a full-on striking battle. Now, Caraway showed he can win fights on the feet. He did it against Eddie Wineland, but a lot of that was because Wineland didn't engage and didn't push forward as much as he could have. Munhoz, on the other hand, is incredibly aggressive. He's got pretty good volume with some good low kicks, and he's got some improving pop in his hands. For Bryan Caraway, traditionally in longer fights, fights that go the distance, he averages between 40 and 60 significant strikes overall. And you look at Munhoz's totals in fights that go 3 rounds: 66, 65, 69, and coming off 117 strike performance in his win over, and the name is escaping me at the moment. Either way, with one of his more recent, it's Brett Johns. He's the type of guy where, if they strike, Caraway's ceiling appears to be Munhoz, for the most part, Munhoz's basement if they go the distance as far as striking totals. I think Munhoz's grappling threat removes a key aspect of Bryan Caraway's offense unless Pedro gets tired. Munhoz has, with that pressure and volume, should control the majority of the action, and I think Caraway just lacks that pop to back him off and send him back. If he's going to press forward and attack John Dodson, who's an elusive fighter with big power, he's going to do the same against Bryan Caraway. Now, there is the possibility here that if Munhoz hurts Bryan Caraway, he could shoot in and get himself choked out. We've seen him choke out. When he caught Rob Font, that was damn impressive. I think Caraway will spend the majority of the fight on the defensive, but he won't make that mistake, and my prediction is Pedro Munhoz to defeat Bryan Caraway by decision. We move now to the main event of the evening in UFC's welterweight division, as the number 3 ranked fighter in the division and former lightweight champion Rafael dos Anjos, 28 wins and 10 losses, takes on the 5th ranked fighter in the division, the Nigerian nightmare Kamaru Usman, with a current record of 13 wins and 1 loss. Currently the former lightweight champion RDA coming in at plus 222 as the underdog, and Usman the favorite at minus 256. Now, RDA is coming off an interim title fight loss against Colby Covington, fighting at welterweight. It was his first loss at 170 pounds, where he's beaten guys like Tarek Safadine, Neil Magny, and Robbie Lawler. So there is that potential for a post-title fight letdown. He's already been in that situation once and lost, losing his title to Eddie Alvarez and then losing the follow-up fight to Tony Ferguson. Could we see a repeat of that here? For Usman, he has won 12 consecutive bouts, 8 in the UFC. He's coming off the win over the biggest name he's fought so far in Damian Maia. Overall, he's got wins over prospects or other guys that are kind of just on the cusp of that top 15. Maia's the biggest name he's beat so far, so RDA is certainly the biggest name he's has fought in the division or will fight in the division to date. RDA, as I mentioned, former lightweight, which was a bit of a concern in the last fight because Colby Covington definitely was the bigger, thicker man. Usman should be that as well. 4 inches taller, 6-inch reach advantage, and he's the younger man by 3 years. Now, you look at RDA when he fought Covington. A lot of people are drawing comparisons here, and I'm definitely going to tell you that fight is influencing the odds for this fight. RDA was the more technical striker compared to Colby Covington, but he couldn't dissuade Covington from coming forward with pressure. He started to fade. He started to give up positions both along the cage and the mat, and that's what cost him. He still landed 105 significant strikes against Covington in that matchup, but he gave up 7 takedowns and 99 significant strikes, and that he wasn't able to overcome that offensive flow. When you look at what Dos Anjos brings in previous welterweight bouts, he landed 172 strikes against Robbie Lawler, 81 against Tarek Safadine, more technically capable and dangerous strikers than Kamaru Usman, especially Robbie Lawler, who's known for his ability to rally and just do damage and hurt guys. When the key to beating RDA over his career has been pressure and aggression. Covington did it with that combination of wrestling and striking pressure. Ferguson did it with striking pressure. Eddie Alvarez knocked him out and with forward pressure. And you go back to Khabib Nurmagomedov way back, that was 4 years ago, did it with wrestling pressure, with takedowns and a constant flow. Usman landed big takedown volume early in his UFC run, landing 17 takedowns in his first 3 fights and establishing himself as a wrestler. He landed 8 against Emil Meek in his most recently successful wrestling-based victory, but other than that, he hasn't been a big volume takedown guy. He landed 1 against Warley Alves, 2 against Sean Strickland. He knocked out Moraes before he really needed to go for a takedown, and none against Damian Maia, understandably. His striking is certainly improving. How improved is it? He was getting cracked by some shots from Maia and certainly trading in that matchup. With Usman, he's shown he can land some volume, but he needs to meld it with takedowns. When he fought Maia, which again is his longest fight as far as how long he went without landing takedowns, he landed 66 significant strikes, which isn't a bad total. When you look at the guys he's fought overall, he's beaten good grapplers with his striking, he's beaten good strikers with his grappling. RDA is the most complete fighter he's faced to date. We've never really seen Usman push, especially over 5 rounds. Can he carry the type of pressure that we've seen that's needed to beat a fighter like Dos Anjos? I don't think he has the striking acumen to close that damage and to engage against him without taking damage and suffering. RDA has those brutal leg kicks, and more importantly, I think, are the body strikes. His ability to land hooks to the body and kicks to the body can do a lot of damage. He was doing a lot of damage against Covington. Covington was getting busted up, and he kept pushing forward, and that shows how tough a guy Colby Covington is. He's an asshole, but he doesn't get the credit for what he's capable of. I don't think Kamaru Usman can do the same. You know, RDA's gone 5 rounds 4 times. Again, fighting some of the best 5-round fighters in the business. Beating Robbie Lawler. Going the distance with Tony Ferguson and not breaking is damn impressive. Going the distance with Colby Covington and not breaking is damn impressive. Usman has gone 5 rounds just 1 time, and he did it against a fighter who's known to fade after just a couple of rounds in Damian Maia. So there's a certain advantage for Dos Anjos there. Usman's more of a control-based fighter over a pressure-based fighter. He likes to get in, establish control, and take you down. I think he's going to struggle to get those takedowns with consistency against Dos Anjos, especially early, even when he's fresh early on, and he's going to struggle to control him. He's going to have to work very hard, and that's going to cost him later in that matchup. I think RDA is going to land the better strikes. I think we're going to see him use those body kicks and body punches to take away his cardio, the leg kicks to slow him down moving forward, and I think he's going to ultimately land more volume than Usman, and we're going to see Usman's ability to land takedowns trail off as the fight advances. Usman's a very good athlete, he's a very good fighter, but he's not the striker needed to beat. You need to beat Dos Anjos. He doesn't have the pressure. He's not that pressure type guy, and I think he gets tired. And my prediction is Rafael Dos Anjos to defeat Kamaru Usman by decision. We're going to move over to the UFC Fight Night 142 event from Adelaide, Australia. Before we get there, I want to point out I've correctly predicted the last 7 main events, which, again, I'm probably jinxing myself at this point. Some of them have been underdog victories. We've seen that. But hey, it's a nice little streak that I like putting up those little green check marks on my website. Our first fight on the Adelaide main card will take place in the UFC's welterweight division as Jake the Celtic Kid Matthews, 13-3-0, fighting out of Australia, will take on Tony Martin with a record of 13 wins and 4 losses. Matthews, the current favorite, at -143, Martin, the Melbet underdog, at +119. Now, Matthews has won 3 consecutive bouts, all since coming back to welterweight where he fought on The Ultimate Fighter. Overall, he is 7-3 in the UFC, including 5-2 when fighting at home in Australia. Martin, also a recent jump to welterweight. He's 2-0 since coming up to 170 pounds. And he's also 5-1 in his last 6 fights. He made the move when he was having success because he felt it was the right thing to do. His only loss in that last 6 bouts, a split decision defeat against Olivier Aubin-Mercier, a man who eliminated Jake Matthews on The Ultimate Fighter back in the day via submission. Physically, Martin 1 inch taller. They have the same reach. Jake Matthews, the younger fighter by 5 years. Now, when you look at both fighters, they've had a lot of success with their ground fighting. Martin, 8 wins by submission. Matthews, 7 wins by submission. Matthews also some ground and pound based victories on the floor. Matthews has taken down 8 of his 10 opponents overall, 13 takedowns over his 7 UFC victories. A much smaller edge in his 3 UFC losses, landing 4 takedowns while giving up 3. For Martin, 6 takedowns in his last 4 wins at lightweight. He has 0 takedowns in his 2 welterweight victories. He's shown more of a striking-based approach. And similar to Matthews, when you look at his last 4 UFC defeats, he's lost the takedown battle by a total of 6-2. When you look at the 2 guys on the ground, I would give the edge to Tony Martin as far as the more technical grappler. He's a greater submission threat. A lot of people don't realize how good a submission guy he is. Submitting Fabricio Comois is impressive, and just what he's been able to do on the mat, and he's very physically strong. Now, he has been beaten on the mat, which is worth noting, but it's only after he's slowed down. He's had a lot of success against everybody, it seems, he takes to the ground. But when he gets tired, that's when his fighters are able to capitalize. When you look at Jake Matthews, where he's had issue on the ground with guys who are technical. Holbrook beat him in a very controversial split decision in Australia, no less, because of his grappling techniques and ability to threaten Matthews on the ground. Kevin Lee, who I picked in an upset there, put him in some bad spots and finished him on the ground, and Matthews really struggled in that position. James Vick submitted Jake Matthews on the mat, and that's where he struggled there. And a lot of people say, well, those are older fights. He hasn't really faced a top-level grappler since those matchups. Both guys on the flip side have been improving their striking. To me, Martin seems to be the more dangerous on the feet, hits a little bit harder, a little more tight with his striking, and a little bit more active. Look for Martin overall in this fight to land the better quality strikes, and he's going to shut down Matthews' attempts to get the fight down, whether it just be through defensive work or the threat of how good he is on the ground. Do not be surprised if Tony Martin gets this fight to the ground and has success. I think he's either going to hurt Matthews on the feet or he's going to get him down, and my prediction is Tony Martin to defeat Jake Matthews by TKO. Our next fight on the Adelaide card takes place in the UFC's heavyweight division as the 10th ranked Super Samoan Mark Hunt, fighting out of New Zealand with a current record of 13 wins, 13 losses, and one draw and one no contest, takes on the 15th ranked Big Pretty Justin Willis with a current record of 6 wins and 1 loss. This fight a near pick'em. Hunt and currently coming in at 106, Willis at 104, so pretty much even. Again, there'll definitely be some movement. I would say of the two, Hunt could become the favorite by fight time as he is the more noteworthy name. But again, fighters might look at his recent struggles and go Willis's way. We'll have to wait and see how it plays out. Now, Hunt, he is fighting his final fight on his contract. He has talked adamantly about retirement. We know his disputes with the UFC, but there's a lot of money out there for heavyweights, especially in Bellator and Rizin and other organizations. And just not being happy with the UFC, he may opt to continue his career elsewhere once his contract is up. And you look at his current run, he has just 1 win in his last 5 fights, a no contest, and that includes a no contest loss to Brock Lesnar. His only win in the span, a TKO win over Derek Lewis, who went on to fight for a title. He's coming off that submission loss to Alexei Oleinik, where he fought in enemy territory. Looked good early, but then ultimately got finished. Willis undefeated so far in the UFC, 3-0 with victories over James Mulheron, Alan Crowder, and Chase Sherman. 2 of those coming by decision, which is a rarity in the heavyweight division. Physically, Willis, he's 6'1", but he's 2 inches taller than Hunt. He'll have a 6-inch reach advantage, and both guys usually come in right around the heavyweight limit. Now, Willis, when he fights, he likes to sit in close range and fire those big power strikes. He throws wide hooks in 1-2s. He does a very good job of mixing up his speeds, going from very fast or very slow to very fast movement, which can throw a lot of guys off. In his 2 3-round fights, he landed 52 and 76 significant strikes. Those are good totals for heavyweights. Not elite totals, but still solid. I'm not overly impressed with the lack of urgency in his game. He's content to sit back, attack, not always engage. He'll throw some counter strikes. He's not always committed to throwing, moving forward with that pressure, which is partly the reason he isn't knocking guys out like crazy. Chase Sherman, he hurt on multiple occasions, and he's a guy who's been knocked out on multiple times. He just didn't elect to push forward and really attack him. Willis has shown he can wrestle, but not his focus, and I really struggle to see him taking down Mark Hunt with any regularity, simply because Hunt is so difficult to take down or keep down, and better wrestlers have had issues doing so. With Mark Hunt, what motivates the guy? What does he have left to prove? Ultimately, I think it's a win at home, a chance to go out on top with a win in Australia, or second home, I guess you could say. Take down a UFC prospect, kind of a big FU to the UFC as he leaves the organization, and he would certainly increase his free agent value. Picking up a win and going out to the market, if he does opt to take some money and take a couple other fights with a more acceptable schedule, certainly a win here would help him there. The takedowns and ground has been the key to beating Mark Hunt. He's given up takedowns in all of his last 5 losses overall, including the Brock fight, totaling 21. In his last 6 wins, he's given up just 1 takedown, all of which he won by knockout. Overeem and Verdum did knock him out in those fights and land no takedowns, so Hunt's chin isn't nearly as rock solid as it used to be, but he still takes a good shot, and it takes a lot to get him out of there. Overall, I think Hunt has the bigger power here, but he's the better striker than Willis. He still needs to be very careful to getting cracked with that reach. I think his low kicks could be a deterrent for Justin Willis to move forward and slow him down. But look for Hunt to land shorter, compact strikes as Willis comes through with those wide hooks and firing those wide hooks. I think Willis just is a little bit too loose, and the fact that he's not as urgent is going to allow Mark Hunt to do what he does best. And my prediction is Mark Hunt to defeat Justin Willis by TKO. In the co-main event of the evening, we're in the UFC's light heavyweight division, is former divisional champion and 13th ranked Mauricio Shogun Rua, 25-11-0, takes on fast-rising 14th ranked Tyson Pedro with a current record of 7 wins and 2 losses. The UFC website does not have his record updated, unfortunately. Pedro, a very heavy favorite at -435. The comeback on the former champion of Shogun at plus 338, again, all odds provided by melbet.org. Shogun's coming off a knockout loss to Anthony Smith. It snapped the 3-fight winning streak that he had put together over a span of 3 years, fighting once in 2015, 16, and 17. He has been now knocked out in each of his last 3 defeats. For Pedro, he's coming off a submission loss to Ovin St. Preux, which was a potential coming out party for him, but it went wrong. He has just 1 win in his last 3 fights, and he's now 3-2 in the UFC after starting off very impressively. Pedro, physically 2 inches taller, he'll have a 3-inch reach advantage, and he's the younger fighter by 10 years. So similar to Mark Hunt, you have to ask yourself, what does Shogun have left in the tank? He's 36 years old. The knockout losses are starting to pile up. He's not going to make another title run, especially after he was unable to get that win against Anthony Smith and extend his winning streak. Had he won that fight, he might have got an opportunity to get back in the mix, but it's just not going to happen. I think that 3-fight winning streak prolonged his run in the UFC and prolonged his ability to stay relevant over a very long period of time. Now, let's not completely write him off, because the guy can still crack. And he can still throw, but his wins have come over flawed fighters. A very aged little nog, a guy in Corey Anderson who's chinny and still developing, and then Gian Vellante, who gets who's got a questionable gas tank, and also his durability takes a hit once he gets tired. When you look at Pedro coming to this fight, that loss versus OSP was a learning experience. He got very aggressive. He hurt him early. He nearly submitted him. He lost position and he got submitted himself. So it teaches a fighter humility and the fact you're not invincible. You need to be very careful and not overextend yourself going for that finish. When Ilir Latifi was able to beat Pedro, he dragged him deeper into that matchup and just won a decision, a fight I correctly predicted. And it was actually the only fight to go outside of the first round for Pedro. So again, it was another one of those learning experiences, a very different learning experience. So again, for a young fighter, that's going to help him grow and develop. Durability has been a major key point to beating Pedro. Survive his onslaught and get the finish with it, which OSP did, or drag the fight deep, which Latifi did. I don't see Shogun having the level of durability needed against a younger, heavier, stronger, physically better conditioned fighter. I don't mean conditioned endurance, just overall he's a better spot condition wise as far as quality of what his body has to offer. Pedro hits hard. He's got a nice kicking attack. He mixes it up and takes, it makes it tough to defend. When he dropped OSP, he set up a nice straight right with some kicks, throwing them all up and down the body. Shogun will have to get inside the range and hurt Pedro, find a way to wear him down or stop him. Again, his better chances to maybe knock him out in the first round, catch him and stop him. Again, we haven't seen Pedro buzzed even. Shogun doesn't have the durability to deal with the physicality of Pedro. I think Tyson Pedro's going to overwhelm him and eventually hurt him. And my prediction is Tyson Pedro to defeat Mauricio Shogun Hua by TKO. Possibly just straight KO. Moving now to the main event of the evening. We're in the UFC's heavyweight division as another former champion, number 7th ranked Junior Cigano dos Santos, 19-5-0, takes on the 11th ranked Thai Bam Bam Tuivasa, undefeated at 10-0. Currently JDS the favorite at -196, while Tuivasa the betting underdog at +130. Now, JDS is coming off a solid victory over Blagoy Ivanov. He has alternated wins and losses over his 8 fights, unable to get that second big victory in consecutively to get him back in the mix. Tuivasa still undefeated in the UFC, 3-0, coming off the biggest win of his career, defeating Andrei Arlovski in a decision. Junior Dos Santos, 2 inches taller. He'll have a 2-inch reach advantage. Ty could come in upwards of 25 pounds heavier than the former champ, and he's the younger man by 9 years. Now, you look at JDS, his last 4 losses, which has kind of been the alternating over the last 8, have come against champion Stipe Miocic, champion Cain Velasquez, beating him twice, and former title challenger Alistair Overeem, multi-organizational champion Alistair Overeem. All good fighters, all at or near the top. Tai Tuivasa is not there yet, but Tai Tuivasa is one of those fighters that, okay, you're a fighter who was at the top, now you're losing to guys at the top. Well, now you got a guy comes along who's not at the top yet, but he's maybe rising up. Does he knock you down? And that's what Tai Tuivasa does. Junior Dos Santos, he sends him on his way down the rankings. Ty's coming off his first win outside of the first round. Did it help to dispel some of the concerns over his performance in longer fights? I'm not so sure it did. His totals through 3 rounds looked okay. He landed 17 strikes in the first round, 22 in the second round, 15 in the second round, and 22 in the third round. And all the way through, Andrei Arlovski was right there with him. I had Andrei to win that fight. I thought he did very well. I thought he could have been given the nod there. I thought if he pushed a little more in the third round, maybe worked in some takedowns, that was his fight to win. He didn't. It was a mistake. Ty took some serious damage in that fight. He was pushed harder than he ever has been before. And as I said, Andrei with takedowns probably takes a decision there. We saw Ty bouncing around in round 2, looking to engage, but not nearly as aggressive. Again, he is a firestorm in the first round, not trying to get guys out of there. But we saw, as I expected, he slowed down in the second and third round. He was still having some success, but he wasn't nearly as dangerous. He was having his most success when he's landing short combinations on the inside. He has a little bit of pro boxing experience, but again, his offense was coming slower and fewer between when he was engaging. On the defensive side, he was getting boxed up with Andrei. When Andrei was staying tight and throwing those short combinations, Andrei was busting him up. His face was a bloody mess and having a lot of success. We saw Tai Tuivasa eventually alternate to just throwing power. He was stepping in with power strikes, and it was fairly easy to see and avoid and disrupt with the jab. And that's worth noting against the other Junior Dos Santos. Again, Tuivasa went the distance. He got the victory, but he's not the same fighter in round 2. He's not the same fighter in round 3, and now he's taking on going potentially 5 rounds for the first time in his career. So that's worth noting. Now for Junior Dos Santos, he has shown improved depth to his game, and despite the fact that he hasn't been able to string wins together consecutively, I've been impressed with what he brings to the table. He's winning fights without knocking guys out, landing 110 significant strikes against Ivanov, 157 against Ben Rothwell, and 123 against Stipe way back in the day. I had him over Ivanov. I had him over Rothwell. I had Stipe in the first meeting, which was unfortunate. Got that one wrong. It was a close fight, very entertaining fight. What Junior does very well, he moves laterally incredibly well. He keeps that right hand loaded, and he'll sometimes punch or jab the body, which is very effective, and he'll come back and he'll target the head. When he's at his best, he's working his combinations, jabbing and following with power strikes. He has that overhand right, big overhand right. He'll throw a nice left uppercut or shovel hook and he'll mix in his kicks. He's got a lot of diversity to his offense, and it's all very tactically sound. Defensively, and this is one of the things that's going to be key to him, for him winning this fight, it was key against Ivanov, it was key against Ben Rothwell, it's his ability to move away, circle out under pressure, and then engage when he wants to. Dispel that forward pressure, that forward momentum his opponent has, make them swing and miss, make them attack nothing, and then while they're recovering, you're set and ready to go again, and you're a little fresher. Ultimately, the successful people that have beaten Junior Dos Santos have used wrestling and clinch fighting. It tires him out, it forces him out of his comfort zone, it forces him to be more defensively mindful and less focused on offense or defending the strikes. That's not Ty's game plan. That's not his approach. He might use the clinch, but it's not something he's going to be on the same level as a Stipe or an Alistair Overeem. Overeem didn't do it too much, but Stipe or a Cain Velasquez. Ty absolutely has power, but can he catch Junior Dos Santos? He's a more technical fighter. He's a little bit bigger fighter, and Ty has a window. I don't want to take a knock at him, but if you can't knock Andrei Arlovski out over 3 rounds when you're supposed to be a knockout fighter, it certainly brings some concern. Again, I'm not saying that he can't knock him out, but you just have some questions about his ability to do so, especially as the fight advances. Junior Dos Santos has the defensive tools to avoid and disrupt what Tai Tuivasa brings to the cage. I love saying that name, Tai Tuivasa. I say it a lot. Once Tai slows down, JDS is going to absolutely take over this fight. Look for JDS to utilize that jab and those kicks to keep Tai out of range. Avoid those power flurries. Circle and reset whenever Tai does move forward. Tuivasa is going to continue to slow down, especially if we get into rounds 4 and 5, it's going to be far worse. Once JDS has him wounded and tired, he's going to keep that strong front. He's not going to take risks. He's going to pick it away at him with that jab, working those body shots, throw kicks, and again, his volume's not going to be huge in any one spurt, but it'll be sizable over the entire fight. And while a knockout and a stoppage is very likely, my prediction is Junior Dos Santos to defeat Tai Tuivasa by decision. So those are my 8 main card predictions for the Ultimate Fighter finale event, and then later on the UFC Fight Night 142 event from Australia. Any main card fights that get added, because they actually haven't solidified the main cards, including the Ultimate Fighter finale championship fights, will be in the prelim section. So again, check that out before you start asking me where my other predictions are. As per usual, the bet packs, which have been on absolute fire, are available at kamikazeoverdrive.net in the bet shop. Just $15 for full card breakdowns. Again, you'll have to bear with me because with all the fights and all the events, I want to do justice to every fight I break down. So I got to crank that stuff out, and it's a busy week for me right now with my actual job, what I'm doing, and all these other fun things. I just got to do jury duty, not jury duty, jury selection. So that was difficult. That definitely slowed me down a little bit on my Monday. Either way, thanks for tuning in, guys. We have some good fights coming up. This should be a really fun fighting weekend. And as per usual, you can check me out on Kamikaze or KO_predictions on Twitter. You can follow me on YouTube, which, hey, I'd love to get 3,000 subscriptions quicker than I got 2,000. Thank you. Melbet.org. Please check them out as well. Click on the link in the description below to bet. And again, thank you guys for tuning in. I'll talk to you soon. Hi.